The train doors slammed shut with a metallic finality that echoed through Daniel Harper's chest like a warning he couldn't yet understand. He stood in the crowded aisle, one hand gripping the overhead rail, the other clutching a worn leather bag that wasn't his. Outside, the city blurred into streaks of gray and gold as the evening rain began to fall. Inside, his heart pounded for reasons he couldn't explain, until he noticed the bag's weight, far heavier than it should have been, and the small engraved initials that were not his own. That was the moment his life quietly stepped off the tracks it had been painfully following for years. Before we go further, if you believe stories about kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of doing what's right still matter in this world, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep these heartfelt stories alive. Daniel was a single father who had long ago stopped expecting miracles. Since his wife Rebecca passed away from a sudden illness 3 years earlier, his world had shrunk to two things: survival and his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Every decision, every sacrifice, every sleepless night revolved around her fragile smile. They lived in a small apartment in Newark, New Jersey, where the heating barely worked and the walls were thin enough to hear neighbors arguing through the night. Daniel worked 2 jobs, warehouse loader by day, janitor by night, yet bills still stacked higher than hope. Lily's asthma medication alone cost more than he could manage some months, forcing him to choose between rent and her breathing. That evening, Daniel had been returning from a rare job interview in Manhattan, an office maintenance position that paid slightly better and came with health insurance. He had worn his only suit, slightly oversized and outdated, but pressed carefully the night before. The interview had gone well, or at least he thought so. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine stability. He boarded the train exhausted, setting his bag beside him as he sat. Across the aisle, a sharply dressed man in his late 50s spoke urgently on the phone, placing an identical leather bag near his feet. When the train lurched and passengers shuffled at the next stop, Daniel grabbed his bag absent-mindedly and stepped off, rushing to catch the bus that would take him home to Lily. He didn't realize the mistake until he reached their apartment. Lily was asleep on the couch, clutching her inhaler, the television flickering silently. Daniel kissed her forehead, then set the bag on the kitchen table. The zipper felt smoother than his own worn one. Confused, he opened it. Bundles of cash stared back at him. Neatly wrapped stacks, hundreds, tens of thousands, maybe more. His breath caught in his throat as if the air had been stolen from the room. Beneath the money lay a sealed envelope embossed with a gold crest. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a typed note on heavy stationery. It was signed by Jonathan Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore National Bank. The letter spoke of a private transaction, instructions for delivery, and a handwritten line at the bottom that felt strangely personal. To the person who finds themselves holding this bag by fate or mistake, character is revealed when no one is watching. Daniel sank into a chair, the words echoing louder than the sight of the money. He counted one bundle with shaking fingers. $10,000. There were many more. Enough to pay Lily's medical bills for years, enough to clear his debts, enough to move them somewhere warm, safe, stable. For the first time since Rebecca died, temptation didn't whisper, it roared. He imagined Lily running freely without inhalers, a real bedroom, a future where he didn't measure groceries down to cents. But then another image surfaced, Rebecca in her final hospital bed, her weak hand gripping his. She had always said that integrity was the one inheritance they could afford to leave Lily. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat at the table staring at the bag, the note, and the invisible line between desperation and dishonor. Dawn crept through the blinds before he finally made his choice. The next morning, after dropping Lily at school, he took the train back to Manhattan, carrying the bag like it contained not money, but judgment. Whitmore National Bank towered above the avenue, all glass and steel and power. Daniel hesitated at the entrance, painfully aware of his scuffed shoes and tired suit. Security stopped him immediately, suspicion written across their faces. He explained, slowly, carefully. The guards exchanged looks before escorting him upstairs. The elevator ride felt longer than his years of struggle. When the doors opened, he stepped into an office larger than his entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Behind a polished desk stood Jonathan Whitmore himself, the man from the train, older up close, sharper. But his eyes carried something unexpected: weariness. Daniel placed the bag on the desk without a word. Whitmore opened it, scanning the contents quickly. When he saw the note still inside, untouched, his expression shifted. Not relief, but something deeper: respect. He asked how much Daniel had taken. Daniel told him none. Whitmore studied him in silence that stretched painfully long. Then he did something Daniel never expected. He smiled, faint but genuine. What Daniel didn't know was that Whitmore had arranged that bag deliberately, not to lose money, but to test character. For months, the CEO had been searching for someone to lead a new charitable foundation in his late wife's memory. He didn't want a polished executive. He wanted someone honest enough to choose integrity over desperation. Dozens had failed similar tests. Some vanished with the money. Others took small amounts. A few returned it, but only after media pressure or legal warnings. Daniel was the first to return everything immediately, without being asked. Whitmore read the strain in Daniel's face, the exhaustion in his posture, the quiet dignity in his choice. He had investigators confirm Daniel's story within hours: his jobs, his daughter, his debts, his wife's passing. By evening, Daniel was called back to the office. He expected questions, maybe a small reward. Instead, Whitmore offered him something that left him speechless: a full-time position managing community outreach for the Whitmore Foundation, housing programs, medical grants, single-parent assistance, a salary triple what he earned, full health insurance, educational funding for Lily. Daniel's knees nearly gave out as emotion he'd buried for years surged all at once. Not pride, relief, the kind that breaks a man before it rebuilds him. Training was difficult at first. Daniel wasn't corporate. He stumbled through presentations and policies. But what he lacked in Polish, he made up for in empathy. He knew what it meant to choose between medicine and rent. He knew the shame of asking for help. Within a year, the programs he oversaw had helped thousands because he built them not from spreadsheets, but from lived pain. Whitmore often watched quietly from a distance, satisfied he had chosen the right man, not by resume, but by conscience. Meanwhile, Lily's life transformed. Her asthma treatments improved. She moved into a sunlit bedroom painted lavender. She joined a school choir Rebecca had once dreamed of for her. One evening, Daniel found her drawing at the kitchen table of their new home. She had sketched 3 figures holding hands: herself, Daniel, and Rebecca, with wings. Above them, she'd written, "Mommy says you did the right thing." Daniel stepped outside afterward and cried for the first time in years, not from grief, but from the overwhelming weight of grace. He often thought back to that train ride, how easily life could have turned, how one desperate decision could have stolen not just money, but destiny. Years later, Daniel himself began writing notes, placing them anonymously in foundation aid packages. Each one carried a version of the same message: character is revealed when no one is watching. Because he knew firsthand, someone always is. And sometimes that someone is the future waiting to meet you. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Stories like this remind us that honesty still has power in a world that often forgets its value. And before we reach the ending, here's a special request. Comment below and tell us, what would you have done if you found that bag? Your thoughts matter more than you know. On the 5th anniversary of Rebecca's passing, Daniel and Lily visited the foundation's newest housing complex, built for struggling single parents. At the entrance stood a bronze plaque. Whitmore had insisted on the inscription himself. It didn't bear his name, it bore Daniel's. Beneath it were the words, "Built on integrity, sustained by compassion." Daniel traced the letters with quiet disbelief. He had never sought recognition, only survival. Whitmore, now older and preparing retirement, stood beside him that day. He admitted something he had never told Daniel before. Losing that bag on the train had not been entirely accidental, but finding Daniel, that had been the miracle. As the sun set behind the building, families moved into their new homes, children laughing, parents crying with relief. Daniel watched them the way he once watched other people's happiness, from a distance. Only now he was part of building it. He squeezed Lily's hand, feeling Rebecca's presence in the quiet spaces between breaths. The wrong bag had found the right man. And because he chose honesty over desperation, one small decision on a rainy train had multiplied into thousands of second chances for strangers he would never meet. If this story moved you, don't forget to engage with the video, like, comment, and share so more people can be reminded that integrity still changes lives.